and welcome to this edition of FiTV. I'm your host, Brad Swanson. We are coming to you from what is the second to last day of the Florida 2021 legislative session. I have the great privilege of being joined by Leader DuBose from South Florida. Leader, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, let's jump right into it. So this session's been crazy. Everybody going in thought COVID was going to lead the day. There's no lobbyists in the building virtually. We're testifying down at the Civic Center for your friends over in the Senate, and we're well distanced in the House when we're over there. You know, if you had to think about the high lines or the leading kind of issues or stories that you can think of for this session, where would you begin?
Oh man, there were so many. There were a lot of negatives, but I'm going to take this opportunity and talk about a couple of positive things that happened this session. For example, we were finally able to pass Restraint Seclusion bill, students with disability. That's a legacy bill that's been around about 15 years, and so I had the pleasure of handling that in the House, and Senator Book had it over in the Senate with Senator Ray Rodriguez as well. And the reason why it's so important because it affects some of our most vulnerable students, and there's nothing up until now that's on the books that define restraint seclusion. And we found since 2010 over 80,000 cases of restraint and maybe over 20,000 as it relates to seclusion. Again, they're the most vulnerable. These are kids who can't necessarily speak. And because there's nothing in place, some of them have come home with bone fractures, bleeding, and in some incidents, death. So that's a real big highlight to really, you know, be able to pick up a legacy piece of legislation and get across the finish line and do something to really protect our most vulnerable students here in Florida.
Yeah, that's commendable, and that's not one obviously that's going to headline the session necessarily, but an important bill. As you move forward into this next day, if there was another piece of legislation that you want to talk about, we can go there. But there has been some major differences, if you will, of opinion and policy this session. What strikes you as some of the biggest?
Obviously, HB1.
Which was the
anti-protester bill.
Anti-protester,
Let's call it what it is.
Okay.
Awful piece of legislation, and honestly, we think it can't get any worse. Now we're dealing with Senate Bill 90, the voter suppression bill. Let's call it what it is. This is legislation that's part of a national narrative. There are at least 36, 37 other states that are dealing with this. We saw it really hit big when it was passed in Georgia, and we saw the response from not only just the legislators that handled this, but from corporate America, and there was some pushback. So now we're dealing with a similar piece of legislation here in Florida.
Yeah, and it's definitely been virtually party line, votes in both chambers and discussions. When you think about the budget, and we go to that, that seems to be a bright spot, if you will, where everybody's coming together on that. Was there anything in particular in the budget that you were a huge fan of?
Well, overall, I think that probably ended up being the sweet landing spot. As I would like to say, thanks to President Joe Biden, Uncle Joe, and Auntie Kamala, Vice President Kamala Harris came through and gave us over $10 billion. So with that type of infusion, we didn't have a choice but to do better by the residents here in Florida as we went through that budget process. And so thanks to the current administration, the budget looks really good this year.
Yeah. Well, $10 billion solves problems.
Solves a lot of problems.
I've got a few problems, but I just like $1 billion worth. That's about it. All right, so let's talk about how has it been? This is your first year as minority leader with Leader Jenny as well. Talk about your relationship with Speaker Sprowls. How has that worked?
It's been fine. I mean, he and I came in the same class. Actually, all three of us came in the same class. And, I think when you disagree in regards to policy, the best way is to start out finding things that you agree on. And he and I both are family men, and we have, young children. And so we want the same things for our kids. We may disagree as to how we accomplish that. And so that has given us a common ground. So as we've worked on different issues and, you know, again, we may not disagree, but we've always had open lines of communication. And as you see, there has been some positive legislation that, as far as maternity health and so forth, that he worked with Representative Leader Pro Tempore Brown.
Right.
And so in this process, working with Speaker Sprowls, I would just probably say a mixed bag in the sense that we've been able to work and accomplish some things, but we've had huge disagreements as it relates to House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 9.
It's the nature of the beast, for sure. Yeah. All right, so we've got 1 day left, God willing, right? But y'all are going to come back for a special session on the gambling compact. Any insights or on what you see there?
As in this process, we'll see. Once we engage, we're trying to make it across the finish line here with what we have, and so things are always ever changing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Leader DuBose, thank you so much for coming on. We always love having you on FiTV. We don't get you on enough, frankly, but we're grateful for you taking the time out of this very busy second to last day of session. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, appreciate it. That's all the time we have for this interview. For more great interviews like this one, make sure you hit us up on our social media feed. And for now, thanks for tuning in.